Today, I'm in conversation with Matthew Ghent. So, Matthew Ghent used to be a goalkeeper for Villa, Barnsley, and various other clubs. We did attend Lilleshall National School, so the FA National School, back in the day when we were kind of 14, and we left when we were 16. I think we've probably seen each other once. I remember when I was at Leicester youth team game and we played against yourselves. And I think that was probably the last time I saw or heard of you. So I'd probably say that was when I was around 16, maybe borderline 17. So thanks for joining me today. Obviously, long time no see. So how's things firstly with yourself? How's life at the minute for you?
Good. Life at the moment is steady and peaceful, I want to say, actually, at the moment, which is a nice thing. I think as the years roll on a bit, you want it a little bit more peaceful. And it is peaceful at the moment, and it's good. It's a bit of a journey. It's short, and realising life's so short now. And it's just trying to, for me, be positive, be happy, day to day, to be honest with you. So it's going well. It's going pretty well, Danny.
Oh, that's good to hear. And you look well as well. I mean, to be honest, again, it's hard for people who don't understand or haven't seen you before, but you were, for me anyway, you were a man already at the age of like 14, which is the first time I ever saw you, because you were like probably 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah, I think grown since.
And I was like probably 4'11", and I was thinking, like, this guy's shaving, he's built like a man. So you wasn't tall and skinny, you were tall and stocky, and
yeah,
like, it was just ridiculous. So you haven't changed, you still look the same. So that's obviously a good thing. And like I said, you're looking really well. So like I said, thanks for coming on the podcast. And I want to touch on kind of your story with regards to playing football and obviously being a decent goalkeeper at a young age and playing for England youth and obviously transitioning away from football. So talk to me about kind of life at the moment, what you're up to nowadays.
Life at the moment, doing the same thing that I've done for 10 years. I run an internet business, which there's been various internet businesses along the way over the decade that I've been doing it for. So something where I started, I wanted to, I'll touch on it later on, but work life, should I say, being employed didn't really work out for many reasons. So I became effectively self-employed. And it's been a great journey. There's been ups and downs. There's been times where it's like, oh shit, it's gone bust. There's been times where it's worked out. There's been business transformations. There's been trying one business, trying another one. But it's pretty steady at the moment, which is good. We've had the last 18 months where it's been the roller coaster for everybody. But generally speaking, it's an online business where we sell products worldwide, which is great, and it pays the bills, which is always a bonus.
That's amazing. So you said we. So is it kind of you and a team, or is it kind of?
Yeah, it's changed. It's transitioned very, very much so over the last few years. So there was a period where I had, I think it was 11 staff at one stage, which was great.
Yeah.
The sustainability of when you take a staff member on, it's hard. It's another, without being derogatory, it's another problem you've got to deal with, because it's another person. It's another person with feelings. It's another person who wants, can I have this day off? Can I swap this shift with that shift? Blah, blah, blah. And it became very, very difficult, if I'm honest with you, to expand the business, because like all businesses has good times, bad times. So it went from sort of 3 staff to 5, back down to 2 staff, then up to 11 staff. And then now might get shot for this, but it's almost now I outsource the work that I want done. Because some of the things that the internet has been good for, you only need a job done for 3 days, if that makes sense. And there's people who will take that work on and make good livings from doing something for 3 days, rather than being employed on a 6-month contract or a 3-month contract or something like that. And that's how it's done now. I do most of it on my own, because it's how it works now, and it's good. I mean, I've never struggled with it. I've never struggled with the working from home, for example, which has become national, worldwide now, hasn't it? So many people work from home. And I think if you'd have said that to people 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they'd have said, well, work from home. No, can't do that. But I cottoned onto that, when I was a rep, sales rep in a few different industries when I came out of football, that I was traveling to sort of Liverpool, Manchester, different places, and there was 4 or 5 hours in the car every day. And I just started to think, what am I doing? This is 5 hours of my day sat in a car. Well, you can speak on the phone on the hands-free, but you're not being productive, in my opinion. So I wanted something that was right. I'm productive, and let's condense the day into a smaller period. So that's where it is now.
Sounds interesting. So you mentioned you've got an online internet business selling products. So are you kind of able to elaborate on the products you sell, or is that kind of a bit too far?
No, not at all. Most of it is hair and beauty.
Okay.
I touched on some seasonal products as well, but I try and gear it, and I have always tried and geared it around nothing that's too big of a product. So, for example, first thing that comes into my head, mountain bikes. If you want 150 mountain bikes in stock, you've got to have a lot of storage and a lot of space and everything else. And then all of a sudden, are your profit margins big enough? Are you making enough money from that bike to then warrant spending X amount on storing them? So everything I sell is quite small. And then I do seasonal stuff as well, which some of the seasonal stuff that I did sounds ridiculous. I started doing this about 6 years ago, and it was chocolate and selling chocolate mainly at Christmas. And at the time, I remember doing it, and I remember the staff literally, I'm not kidding you, went on to Tesco, Sainsbury's, Morrison's, opened accounts with all of them, and thought, right, and then just picked the offers of what they had, because these companies buy in the 500,000 tubs of Cadbury's Heroes per year. And then when they had the offer on them, everyone knows the price is £3.50, £4 a tub. I'd order 1,500 tubs to come to work. And then off they went to Amazon, selling them on eBay all around the world. Wow. And that's what I did, which at the times, the staff that worked for me, they turned around and went, you lost the plot. You must be crazy. Who's going to buy these when they're £4 in the shop and you're selling them for 10 quid online? And I said, it'll work. And 10 quid sounds a lot of money. When you take off your postage costs, it's included, your VAT, your taxes, your fees for the sites and stuff. You're not left with much, but you're still left with a bit more than Tesco will make. And it was ridiculous how many people were ordering and where they were going. All over the world. Australia, Brazil, Norway, even China. And it was it got stupid. So then started selling dairy milk bars and tippled in tea bags and stuff like that. And it became a bit of a sideline as well, which, to be honest with you, was really enjoyable. And because when I was selling the hair and beauty products mainly, in the end, I got bored. I sold another hairdryer, great. Sold another brush, wonderful. I'd get excited when new products come in. But the chocolate was always interesting because you'd think, right, and someone would buy some from Sri Lanka. Wow. And I always used to think from the hot countries that they bought it from, I said, this is going to turn up and it's going to be melted, surely. But it worked out. It did all right. So I dabble in that, and mainly hair and beauty products 365 days a year. And then it's seasonal stuff and anything that will sell, really.
Wow, that's amazing. And I want to kind of elaborate more on that a bit later on. Yeah. Talk to me about your transition away from playing football. So I want to kind of just give you a bit of an intro here. So if you don't know kind of Ghent, so basically Matthew Ghent was top goalkeeper, obviously attended the FA National School. So at that level, you need to be kind of one of the best in the country. So he obviously was, and then he went on to play for kind of England youth and obviously did really well there. So that's kind of a bit of a touching on the surface kind of intro for yourself. But talk to me about obviously your transition, because you've left Lilleshall, you've gone to Villa, obviously a hot prospect and one of the best keepers in the country. And then talk to me about kind of your apprenticeship and going on from there.
For me, when I left Lilleshall for me was probably the most, apart from when I was 10, 11, 12, 13, Lilleshall was the most enjoyable time for me of all the years I played football, without a doubt. There is nothing that comes close. Because for me at Lilleshall, even looking back on it now and looking back on it through the years, you were playing football because you loved football. I found, to cut a long story short, the moment I went to Villa, I found it became a business. And at Villa, for me, you were treated as someone that would effectively make money for the club. That was how it was. That's how I felt. And that's how it was for me. And when I went to Villa, I mean, I was looking forward to it. It was great. Signed a 4-year pro contract. It was, everyone, I'd go in when I took time away from Lilleshall, when we'd have school holidays and stuff like that and everything else. I would go into Villa and train with the reserves or the youth team when I was sort of 14 and 15 years old. And it was brilliant. And you were almost a little bit dazzled with, look, there's all the pros, there's Bosnich. I remember Bosnich coming up to me in the canteen when I was 15 and me being introduced to everyone. And to be honest, made to feel like a star. That's how I was made to feel when I went before I started there. When I started there, you were basically, who are you? Who do you think you are? The language like that. And to be honest with you, Villa was not a great time for me for many reasons. And I struggled with it because I found that football was almost, back in them days, a bubble, where you're in a bubble and it's the world can't touch you. And you were made to feel, and at the time then, it's very different now with the wages, but at the time, one of the most common things I ever heard, and people said to me when they were trying to push you, do you want the 10 grand a week? Do you want the 10 grand? It was that figure that was bandied round, because back in 1997, 98, the 10 grand a week mark was a major figure for the first team top players. And that was hammered home to you. And it's, you know, when I was at Villa, I'm not going to lie, some of the ways that you were treated, but not every player, was quite frankly horrific. That if it happened nowadays, well, it wouldn't happen nowadays. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't. And it was terrible. And it was a struggle. It was a struggle with, I'd gone from sort of being at Lilleshall and enjoying football and absolutely adoring representing my country, to Villa, where it felt as though the pressure was escalated tenfold straight away, which I understand. I understand now. I understand they want results. They want the youth team to win the FA Cup. They want the reserves to win their local league at the time. They want the first team to be top of the Premier League. All this, I get it. But I found when you're 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, without potentially sounding disrespectful, you're a child in your mind. You are easily sort of manipulated. You are easily coerced. You are all these things that can affect you going further forward. So there was some good times at Villa, don't get me wrong. I mean, you know, there was a situation where at 17 I ended up on the bench at Man United and was sort of, what's going on? We're at Old Trafford, I'm 17, I'm on the bench. Oakes is playing in goal, Bosnich is injured. What happens if I go on? And just kind of forgot about that and loved it. But there were other times where it was, I think tough's a mild word, to be honest with you. It was. And for me,
I can resonate with a lot you said, and I'm not going to, sorry to cut you, I want you to jump back on in a second, but before I forget, obviously, we're both from the Midlands, and obviously, I'm talking about when I was playing for Leicester now, and I remember going to Villa's training ground, and I remember hearing some of the staff and how they used to shout to at the players, and this is like not even when there's a game, just in and around the place. And I can remember thinking to myself, I'm so glad I'm not playing for Villa. I'm so glad I'm at Leicester, because how we were treated at Leicester, especially at that time, and the Martin O'Neill and the staff that were there, kind of Neil Rudkin and kind of Neville Hamilton and Dave Nish. Obviously, Neville Hamilton passed away, God rest his soul, but they were so approachable. Yeah, they were hard at times, but they never really came down on us to make us feel like nothing. Where I do remember playing games at Villa in the youth team, and also just walking around after games and that, or on the way to play a game in and around the training ground, and you'd hear certain comments and just like verbalizing like horrible stuff. And I just think like, what is going on? And obviously the facilities and everything, and Villa being a massive club, that was always amazing. And they always had, for me, another thing, they always had loads of players. I always remember just loads of players being there and thinking, wow, like just ridiculous. But carry on.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, one thing I don't want to do is I don't want people to watch this and think, oh, God, it sits there, he's complain about this, he complain about that. There were good times, but sometimes you do think about the bad times. And I won't name any specific coaching staff. Certain people in football will know who I'm talking about. It doesn't take a rocket scientist, but it was so weird. And even to this day, when I look back on it, how they treated the players, there was no pattern to it. It weren't as though, you know, and it weren't as though they picked the smallest and weakest player and bullied that person. It would change and it would chop and move around, and there was no pattern to who they would one day walk in and just fire off at. Literally, it was. It almost felt, as the years rolled on and I started thinking about it more, it almost felt as though, I don't know, they'd had a bad day on the journey to work and they were late, or they'd had a row with their partner and their dogs been to the toilet all over the kitchen floor and stuff, and they come in and just fired off at someone. And that's how it was. And the thing I will say about the coaching staff at Villa, and it was such a shame because Villa was up the road from me. Fantastic club, enormous club, huge club now, was a huge club back then. But it filtered all the way through the coaching staff and all the way up to the first team manager. The first team manager who signed me, I thought he was great guy. A little bit weak at times. But the one that came in after that, I mean, to be honest with you, she was a tosser. And the way the youth team coaches at the time and the reserve team coach at the time, the three coaches that managed the youth team and the reserve team, they dominated the club. For me, someone else may say something different who was there at the same time. They dominated the club. One was in the news recently about, there was a lot going on and he was effectively let go from Villa and blah, blah, blah. And he wasn't the worst by a long way. Had his days and some very bad days, but he weren't the worst. And it filtered through. I mean, I remember sitting after a youth team match at Villa Park. We played at Villa Park. We'd lost. And there was this culture at Villa where after the game, they would sit you down. And you know what it's like after a game. You're knackered. At 17, 18, you're not particularly thinking clearly. You're thinking about whatever. I want to go home. I want some food. I'm done. Didn't play very well. That was to this. Can you hear me, Danny?
I can hear you now. You just cut out there. You're talking about when you've just finished the game.
Yeah, is my camera on still?
No,
the thing fell off the stand. Okay, right. On my screen, it's saying safe driving mode. Your microphone is muted. Don't quite know how to get back because it just says done speaking. So I'm trying to get back to the video because I've only got the option. Let me try and get it back because I've got a makeshift. I don't know if everyone else is all prepared, but I've got a makeshift bloody stand here.
Nah, don't worry, it's fine. I can hear you. I just can't see you anymore.
Let's get you back on. I'm trying to get the screen back. Safe driving mode.
There you go. Yeah. Back on.
Worked it out. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah. It's all good.
Right, you'll be back on now.
I can hear you. Yeah. It's all good.
Great. If it falls off again, I'll have to do something different with it.
All right.
But I'll rewind that bit. It was basically, there was a game, and you know what it's like after a game. You're thinking about going home. You're thinking about food, whatever it is, getting away from the ground. You've played bad, you've played well, whatever it is. And the last thing you want to do is have literally a 45-minute, an hour meeting after the game. And these meetings were intense, screaming, shouting, singling people out, which effectively a bunch of kids from the age of 16, if they've been pulled up for the youth cup matches, to all the way up to 18. And there's one thing that sticks in my head like it was yesterday. And you've got half the reserve team in there because the reserve team had to go and watch the youth team game. Yeah. And the coach at the time, he sat there and he started digging me out. You don't do this, you don't shout enough, you don't do this, blah, blah, blah. And I shook my head. I was sitting there, remember where I was sitting, shook my head like that. Yeah, because a bit of, I'm going to participate in what you're saying here, and I'm going to give a bit of feedback back if you let me speak. And the first thing that came out of his mouth was, who the fuck do you think you're shaking your head at? And I went like that. And he said, you shake your fucking head at me again and I'll put it through that fucking window. And that was in front of the whole youth team and the whole, reserve, half the reserve team. Okay, if you work on a building site like I've done, it's pretty nothing. It's nothing when you're a 30-year-old man. But when you're a kid, it humiliates you. And it doesn't particularly bode you in a good place going forward with things you think. Because then literally when things like that happen, the next day you'd go into training and there'd be arms around you and you're all right, how you doing? It was just a messing with your head in a way. Wow. And there was incidents after incidents like that. I remember once as the jobs you had to do there. You've got one of the staff who'd come and inspect the changing rooms after. And one of the players hadn't emptied the bin in the black bin liner. He'd emptied it, but then he'd swept all the rubbish off the floor and put it in the bin liner. And the coach, the same coach who said that to me, I was in the room. He's lifted the bin up, saying fucking clean, just shook it all around the changing room, launched the bin at the wall, fucking clean it up. It was, I wish I could see my time over again, Put it that way.
That's ridiculous. And that's kind of borderline bullying. I never experienced anything like that. Obviously, going back, you're looking at 20 odd years, and obviously we had to do jobs and stuff after first team games and after kind of everyday training and stuff. So Absolutely. It's all changed now, and the parameters have changed, and kind of rules and regulations have changed, and there's still elements of that type of thing in there, but it's more, I'd probably say it's more underhand, if that makes sense. And you all know the infrastructure and everything's changed, and it just to hear those things, like, it just, I used to hear about like Villa, especially kind of after 18 games, they'd have to go and have a meeting for like an hour and that, and I'd be thinking, what? Like we just get changed. We have a little chat after the game about how well or how poorly it's gone or whatever, and then you just have a shower and you go back on the coach or you get in your car and go home.
Absolutely.
Like, yeah, just that for me, like an hour and a half intense meeting after a game, especially when you paid badly. It's like, I couldn't. That wouldn't wash well with me anyway. Talk to me about your transition. Like, talk to me about your transition away from football. How was your retirement process?
Okay, so the transition away from football, Villa, then I went to Forest for a short period, you know, sort of played in the reserves a few times. Then I went to Lincoln. And there was, you know, weren't particularly great, bounced around a few there, ended up at Barnsley, had a good time at Barnsley, enjoyed it, generally speaking, playing in the first team, stuff like that. And then, of course, I played for, I've got to be honest with you, I played for a few non-league clubs. I can't remember the names that I played for, because at the time, it was a time in my life where it wasn't particularly wonderful. So if you ask me about the transition, which there should be things in place for the transition for footballers now, the transition for me was non-existent. I completely fell apart, as a person, mentally, physically, absolutely everything, completely and utterly fell apart because I didn't know where to go. It was almost, I sort of, when I left Villa, I could feel it slide down a bit, you know, Nottingham Forest, Lincoln. And then I got a lifeline, went to Barnsley and did well at Barnsley. And then my head started to change and my, well, it's the word everyone uses, my mental health fell apart. And then I left Barnsley, got offered a contract at Macclesfield and turned it down. And from there, the transition into normal work, to be honest with you, Danny, just didn't really happen. There was no structure in place. There was nothing in place to help you. I'm not saying you should sit there and go, please help me. You've got to do everything for you. But there was nothing in football at the time that could notice, whoa, this guy, his behaviour isn't particularly, isn't as it should be. Something's wrong with him. He weren't like this 6 months ago. What's going on? Whereas now I'm sure there's people that can talk to him and so on. So the transition initially there wasn't one. It was a disaster. And I ended up in trouble, left, right and centre. Did things that I'm not proud of, things that I've, you know, paid the punishment for. And then it just spiraled and kept spiraling for years, if I'm honest, where it was, my life was a complete and utter mess, to say the least. It was chaos. Where, I mean, there was periods where I was sleeping in my car, you know, absolutely 83 on alcohol, drugs, you name it. It just went completely off the rails. I wish I could turn around and say, no, the transition was brilliant and this, but it weren't, if I'm honest.
And this is what the podcast is about, because it's about letting people know, kind of from the outside looking in, people always have a perspective of people, especially sports people, oh, they're earning this money and life's great, and when they finish, they can just put their feet up and that. And that's the case for a very kind of small percentage of footballers, and they're obviously the top high profile ones, and even then the transition is not always easy for those. So it's not about money necessarily, it's just about again how you process things. And again, I try not to look back, because I want to be I don't look back purely because I don't want to I want to be here in the present. So I don't want to be looking back and kind of miss moments that I could be moving forward with. So that's one thing I try and do. And again, I like people to obviously elaborate on what their kind of experience has been, just because from the outside looking in, like I said, people always have a perspective and it's not always true, or it's not always what it seems to be like. So for you, obviously the transition, you mentioned there, it was difficult. And what was a turning point for you that made you think, okay, I need to change what I'm doing now. I need to kind of look to something more positive.
The turning point for me was, I think, you know, I affected with things that happened. I affected a lot of people. Now, of course, not everything you read and look up on Google is true. It's sensationalization with papers. And some of the stuff I've read, I just think, really, that happened? Well, no, I don't think it did. But there was a point where I thought, you know, hold on, there's friends, there's family, they're upset. I can see in their faces. And because at the time, my head was so unclear, so clouded, not really understanding what was going on, I didn't see any of this. And then I think what happened really with my head was it just started to uncloud itself. It might sound vague, but I think sometimes you start to notice little things. My parents were upset with this. My friends are a bit cautious around me. Why is this? And then your brain sort of figures some things out. And I started to realize that you need to change things here. You need to move forward with your life, and you need to try and let go of football, because that was a big thing, that from playing it from 9 years old and professionally and for England and all this, it's almost like I sort of just, that's my life, period. And I did think, like I think a lot of people do, when you're 18, football, yeah, it's forever. And you think that 30 years old is old, you think 35 years old is ancient, and you think, I'm not going to need to worry at 35, that's forever away. And you blink and bang and you're at 35. And it worked for me, it was like 20s. But I started to realize that, right, there's no special treatment here. The bills need to be paid. You need to pay for somewhere to live. You need to pay your gas. You need to pay your electric. And you need to start doing what most of the population do. And that's work for a living. And that's what I started to realize. I struggled with initially I struggled with, I mean, some people listen to this and go, what? I struggled with the length of days, 8-hour, 10-hour days at work. I couldn't get my head around it because football was always very intense. Yes, there were days where it was long till 11 o'clock at night, but it was train for a while, break, eat, rest. Train for a while, break, eat, rest. And the day was so split up. Whereas when you go to a work and your boss says, you got to pay your way to keep your job, it's 8 hours of graft. And I started to realize that. It took a long, long time. But I started to realize, welcome to the real world.
Yeah, it's tough. And again, people always assume that the transition is going to be easy. And even if you do have something in mind when you are playing, whatever your chosen sport is, whether you're going to college or uni and you've got a course that you're doing and whatever, and you've got a structure in mind, anything can happen. If you look back 2 years, no one knew anything about COVID, and then suddenly COVID comes and people's 5-year plans are now either 10-year plans or just out of the window. They've pivoted and taken a different direction in their journey. So it's difficult. And again, for me, like, I hate when people, I always hear this, and you've probably heard it many times in the media and stuff, where athletes will say they've lost their identity. And it frustrates me so much because you haven't lost your identity just because you're no longer playing tennis or rugby or whatever. You're still going to be John Smith. You just don't play tennis or rugby anymore. How other people perceive you, you can't really control what other people think about you. You can obviously there's elements of that where you can control, but if they look at you and say, oh, there's Matthew Ghent, he used to be the goalkeeper for Villa, or there's Matthew Ghent, he plays for England in the 18s, that's up to them. But for me, in order to, and again, this isn't me telling people how to suck eggs, but in order for you to aid your transition away from your chosen sport, it helps you if you see yourself first and then you, the athlete, second. Anything other than that, I just think that it's just going to hinder your transition. And again, the transition, even if you do have that train of thought, doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It wasn't necessarily easy for me from a financial perspective because I took a massive drop in wages. But in terms of me being able to leave football behind of my own accord and then step into an estate agent, which is what I was doing initially, that was fine. I didn't even go around telling people. Like, people just saw me wearing a suit and they were like, oh, what are you doing now? And it's like, I don't play football anymore. So I was happy to do that purely because it was a respectable job, respectable industry, sustainable, and it was my own choice to leave football behind. Could have been different if it was out of my hands and it was through injury or whatever. So it's always a difficult one. And obviously yours, it seems like you've been through a lot. And obviously you've come out of that a stronger person. I mean, you obviously had transferable skills that you already had within your psyche and throughout sport that aided you to obviously make that transition. So what would you say your transferable skills were that helped you make that kind of transition to doing what you're doing now?
For me, just touching, if you don't mind, Danny, what you said, you're so true about what you said about trying to put the fact that you were a footballer or a tennis player or, whatever you were, trying to realize that effectively is a chapter in your life. And just because you did it, it doesn't define you, and it doesn't define you forever going forward. You can and are allowed to have a career every 5 years and be great selling houses, being a footballer, mortgages, whatever it is that you're doing. And I totally agree with what you said. Totally agree. With regards to transferable skills for me, one thing I was pretty clear of from the moment I started realizing I need to earn money, basically, to, you know, have a life as well, because the career weren't really in my head at the time. It was about getting myself straight, and as time's gone on, I've realized I wanted to do something I enjoy. But for me, I always realized I wanted to have the independence of working effectively for myself.
Okay.
Whatever it was, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and I was very daunted by, you know, tradesmen, effectively, plumbers, electricians, tree surgeons, you know, people, landscapers, because although a lot of people may view their job as, well, they're just a plumber, it's a trade, it's a skill, it's something they've learned for a long period of time. And I had no experience in no experience in any industry like that. And it was quite daunting to start thinking, what do I do? What shall I do? But the one thing I did know was that I knew I wanted to do something on my own, or work for myself, or something along that lines. And that gave me a bit of a kickstart to start thinking about things I could do, and tried a few things on my own. Didn't work out, because you need to earn enough money to live, and didn't work out. But that was one skill that I knew I had, definitely, without a doubt.
Okay, amazing. And you'd be surprised in kind of the amount of athletes that have gone into sales. And when people talk about sales, I don't know about, maybe not so much nowadays, but I'd probably say going back 20, 30 years, if you said salesperson or salesman or saleswoman, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, to someone, straight away they're thinking car dealership, dodgy deals. And it's like,
so true.
But if you look at it now, if you look at any kind of industry, whether you're working autonomously or in a team or whatever it is, sales is involved in everything. If you're working like you are on your own, you probably don't get to see many people, because it's all like online interactions and whatever.
Absolutely.
You still need to sell yourself. No one's going to come and buy from you if they don't trust you. So straight away, you're selling yourself through your services, the amount of sales you make, the products you're selling, the prices, and things like that. If you're working in a face-to-face job, you're selling yourself by your appearance, how you kind of come across verbally, and things like that.
So true.
Everything has got an element of sales in it. I don't care what the industry is. You're always selling yourself. So sales is massive, and hence why sales pay so well, generically, normally anyway. But yeah,
definitely, without a doubt.
Yeah,
it's true what you say about sales. I use a similar analogy when I turn around and say, you know, when I've looked for the products, and the family said, well, what are you going to sell now? And I said, well, technically, it's not shallow, but when you look around your house, everything in your house has been sold by a company, down to the paint and the plasterboard on the wall, the bricks that build the house, the plant pot on the table. So sales are a massive part in life. And you're right with regards to how someone views you face to face, or whether you're online and the way you write your emails, etc., so on and so forth. But it's a big part, and a lot of sportsmen do go into sales. You're right.
Yeah, 100%. And with regards to retirement, and again, I'm drawing back on kind of when we were kind of 18, 19, or maybe even 2025, and we're talking about retirement. And if anyone ever broached the conversation with you, kind of, what are you going to do after playing football, or if you were even thinking about kind of maybe what am I going to do when I retire, it was always for me, it was always approached in a negative way. It's like, I don't really want to be working in an office, or a coach would pull you in. We've all been training, and I don't know, we've had a poor training session, and the coach pulls you in and he's like, well, it could be worse. Like, you don't realize what you got. It could be worse. You could be sitting in an office. And it's like, I had friends working in offices, and they were earning way more than me at that point, and it was like, they're happy. So why do they always draw on the office scenario, like as if that's a bad thing? I never understood it. I didn't resonate with it. It didn't sit well with me. So it was always, for me, when we spoke about retirement or anything of that ilk back in the day, and I'd probably say maybe nowadays it's probably still pretty much the same. It was always seen in a negative light. So do you think nowadays, do you think retirement needs to be approached in a different way? And I'm talking about from an athlete's perspective, parents as well, and also coaches, and any kind of organizational perspective as well.
I think so. I think absolutely. I think it's something that needs to be talked about in clubs more, and to move away from the bubble of football, and to move away from the almost bury your head in the sand that you're here now, this is the most important thing in the world. I understand it's the most important thing when you're playing football, but you've got to start trying to, I feel, educate 16, 17, 25, 28, 30, 32-year-olds, you've got to start educating them that it is still, even at 34, 35, in a way, the start of your life. There are so many more things that you can do with the rest of your life, whether it be if you come out of football because you're released at 19, it isn't bad to work in an office. It isn't bad to work the bins. It isn't bad to stack shelves. And all the jobs that people have a bit of a detrimental feeling about, when they say, that was said at football time, you'll end up stacking shelves. Well, newsflash, if someone doesn't stack the shelves in Sainsbury's, then no one's going to get any food. So that job's important.
Yeah.
And I think it's got to be educated to that there's no shame that if you don't quite make the cut in football, you might make the cut at another club. You see it all the time. Someone gets released at 17 and ends up being a superstar.
Yeah.
But you might not make the cut at that club, and you might not make the cut at the next club. What would you like to do? What could you do? What are you good at? Are you good at whatever? Are you good at making things? Are you good at talking so that you could sell something? Is there a certain thing that's always interested you when you was a kid? Well, yeah, I used to like fixing things. What kind of things? Well, I was fascinated with. And before you know, they can fall into and they end up at college and university to do a course in plumbing or recruitment or anything.
100%. And you mentioned about, again, the analogy of stacking shelves and things, but sometimes it's just about trying stuff, because when you're stacking shelves, you still have to interact with people. You still have to turn up on time. You still have to maybe direct someone in the correct direction.
Absolutely.
Maybe looking for something. So all of those are interpersonal skills. You're building your knowledge base. You could start from the bottom. I had to start from the bottom when I stopped playing football. I went into an estate agent. My salary was a third of what I was initially earning, and I wasn't earning big money in football anyway. But I knew that there were stepping stones there for me to progress, and I progressed really fast. I've got my accreditations and whatever, and then now I'm working for a technology company. We sell software, so it's completely different, but still in property. So for me, you may be stacking shelves initially, and then you could be maybe working on the floor doing something else, maybe behind the checkout after that, and then maybe upstairs at a latter stage, maybe 3 or 4 years later within the company kind of management system or whatever it may be. So it's not always a case of pinpointing something and saying, right, that's it, tunnel vision, and that's what I'm going to be doing after I play for the rest of my life. It may not happen like that. There's so many different avenues and people that you meet, and they can introduce you to other people. And before you know it, you've got a network of people that are in different industries, and there's different strands of those industries that can take you anywhere. So it's massive,
so true.
Massive.
It's so true, because you can generalize and say an office job. But an office job, there's how many occupations must there be that works in an office in this country? There must be thousands and thousands of different occupations that work in an office. I mean, technically, firemen work in an office if they're doing paperwork. So it's a bit of a generalization, isn't it, when you say an office job? But I think as well with footballers, I don't know if they do it now, but I understand that the higher up they go, they have commitments with sponsors and everything else. But I think it would be good. I think Liverpool maybe did it. They do a lot of charity work with going to hospitals and stuff. But I think some of footballers, and certainly the lower leagues, should be, after a training session in the afternoon, it should be put in their contracts, and it's an obligation that they go and maybe do a bit of part-time work, or go and see how people work. Someone who works, let's use the office example, but they go and do it for 3 or 4 hours, or see how these people work or what they do for a living. Because I think it would help them get out of the bubble of football and realize that when you're 35, even if you have more money than you can dream of, and you don't need to work, you'll get bored and you'll want to do something. So you need to start looking at the rest of the world, because there's how many pundits are there that go on telly? Handful. How many people go to coaching? A minimal amount. You've got people, and that's the thing. There's hundreds of people coming out of football, thousands if you took every level, every year, and nothing's done about that. It's almost, the way I see it a little bit is a bit how some of the people who have served in the forces are. You're here. This is so important. You're not in the forces anymore. There's no support. It's a bit like that, the way I see it. And I don't think it's good.
You're 100% right. And you mentioned about kind of experiencing other things whilst playing at whatever stage. And I was having a conversation. I've had many conversations with various people about work placements for athletes. So me, for example, and probably every athlete, you want something tangible. If you can touch it, feel it, smell it, see how it works, there's more chance of you getting involved. So if you, after training
Absolutely.
maybe once a week, you all know that Wednesdays is normally the day off. How about going and working in a warehouse or going and working in an
Yeah,
office or something just for half a day? Go and shadow someone, experience, maybe get on the phones and have a conversation. It's a win-win for
absolutely.
everyone. It's a win-win for everyone. It doesn't cost the company anything. It doesn't cost
Yeah,
the club anything. The club can promote it because they're saying we're now looking after our players. This is what we're doing. The company that are actually having these players in on a daily basis or once a week or whatever it is, they can promote it and say, look, we've got X, Y, and Z coming in from Villa or Birmingham or wherever it is. And that's
yeah,
an incentive for people to come in and maybe see what's going on, especially if it's a team where, say, for example, Coventry City, where it's a
yeah,
small community and everyone in Coventry more than likely supports Coventry. So if they
yeah.
can go to their local estate agents and see their hero who scored at the weekend working
Oh,
in the
yeah,
office,
absolutely.
it's a conversation starter straight away, and it's like bringing more business to that particular company, and also the player gets to see things from a different
Yeah,
perspective, and also the people that are working there do, because as you know, they will have a
absolutely.
perception of that particular player. He or she plays
Yes.
football. They're going to be of this type, and then when they come and work in that environment, they can see actually
Mm.
that person's quite articulate. They're turning up on time. They're actually asking questions, and they're asking the right questions. So that's just a
Yeah.
small little piece of like what's going on in my head in terms of what I believe
Mm.
can happen going forward. But whether it happens or not and how feasible it is, I don't know, but it can be done. But based on all the infrastructure that's involved at the moment, it can be done.
It
Um,
absolutely can. And I think it would be a great thing as well.
yeah, 100%. In terms of advice, is there any advice that you'd give to any athlete at any level? So I'm talking
Yeah.
youngsters, mid-age, and then ones that are coming towards the end of their careers. Is there any advice that you'd give to them with regards to ways to aid their transition away from their chosen sport?
It's that old saying. It's that old saying, isn't it? You can't put an old head on young shoulders, which I wish you could, because from seeing, I love the gym now. I go to the gym, and you see the 20-year-olds and 21-year-olds in the gym, and they almost look at you like, you know, I'm 41 now, and they almost look at you like you're an old guy.
Yeah.
And it's trying, for me, it would be, if I was going to give some advice to people, it would be try and realize that, yes, football is incredible. And if you're enjoying it, wow, stick it in and grab every single moment. Enjoy everything. Enjoy every coach ride, every training session, everything you do, enjoy every moment. But also realize that this is going to be probably, not necessarily, but probably a very small chapter of your life. And if you've become successful in football, and successful not because you've been on the telly and earned a load of money and blah, 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 or played X amount of games, successful because you've enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So if you've enjoyed it and it's a living for you, in my opinion, that's a success. That's success. But realize that you can have another 3, 4, 5 periods of success in your life in other things, because your body is going to stop, generally speaking, at 30, 35, it's going to slow down, and you're not going to get to that final ball as quick as someone who's maybe 10 years younger. And that's going to happen. Yeah. So unless you go into coaching or you're a pundit or something else, you're going to have to do something else. So try and enjoy every moment, but try and also think about the future. I think they've so got to really hammer home about the future more, which I understand is hard, because it's hard to say to someone that all they want to do is play football when they're 18, 19, 25. They don't care about anything else. And I'm never going to have to do that, they say. You probably will. Yeah. And you will enjoy it as well. Yeah. As the time goes on, you will enjoy other things, you know, in life. You will. So really trying to get them to look for the future as well. I think definitely, without a doubt.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right with everything you said there. And I kind of resonate with everything you've mentioned kind of throughout the chat. So I really enjoyed obviously catching up and obviously touching on kind of, I'd say your life story, but your life hasn't even ended yet. So it's just kind of skimming on the surface, really, but really enjoyed it, really insightful. If you want to just let us know, if you can, I don't know how much you can elaborate on, but if you want to just let me know or let everyone know the name of your company, where we can find you, if you're on social media and things like that, where we can find you as well. Basically,
my stuff that I sell, I am in the floods of thousands and thousands of sellers in the country that sell on eBay and Amazon.
Okay.
So you can give you a username. It's about searching products, but yeah, if I can touch on that, that's another. I've encountered a similar thing with the work as to what I did with football. That people sort of segment eBay and Amazon and say, "Oh, well, it's just selling a few bits on eBay and Amazon." I wish I'd started selling stuff on eBay and Amazon when it started, when I was playing football, mate. Trust me. Because if you'd have got involved in it in 1998, 9, 2000 when it started, you'd have never looked back. So yeah, it's basically that's where I sell now, which at the time was difficult because people were like, "Is that what you do? You sell on there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it'll work. I've been doing it for 10 years." But now the good thing is about the world nowadays, it's changed. That now people have job titles as a YouTuber, or I make my money from TikTok. And 3 years ago, you're like, TikTok, what? And there's people, that's how they earn their living. Yeah. So, yeah, there you go. Hope that helps.
Nah, amazing. And to be honest, I'm really happy for you how you kind of turned your life around. You're obviously really successful. Yeah. I've only been on social media for, I'll probably say just over a year, based on the fact that that's when I started my podcast. Prior to that, I was never really a fan of social media and things like that. But I've obviously seen you on there, and I've seen that you're driving my dream car, which is Porsche, or one of my dream cars, Porsche Panamera. Yeah. So you're obviously doing really well for yourself. So, yeah, that's amazing. Keep up the good work. And obviously try and keep in touch going forward. I hope it goes all well for you as well.
Thank you. And you. All the best, Danny.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for coming on. Speak to you soon.
See you, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.